What's up, No Nation? It's the guys from Plant the Spear back with another episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Michael, we got a couple of little things to clean up today. We got some basketball stuff to talk to. Kind of things are falling apart over there at the
Yeah.
at the Tucker Center. So we're going to touch up on that. Baseball has another series, ACC, this weekend. We're going to talk a little bit about last year versus this year and just some of the progress that they've made. But of course, we got to find some football talk. And so we got a couple of little updates from some recent lawsuit action in North Carolina, as well as a couple of little things from spring. But we have another episode coming up that you guys are going to be really excited about, where we're going to go over a lot of spring with a former 2013 national champion. And so we'll be breaking that news coming up probably next week on who it's going to be. And so you guys stay tuned. So we're going to save some of the spring stuff for that one. But I did come up with a little bit of a fun game that we're going to get into
All
about
right, let's
next
go.
season, and it'll be the spring edition. We'll revisit this later on once we see how things shake out. But with that being said, Michael, how are you, my friend? Thank you for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jesse. Looking forward to it. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that episode. I think the fans, think you guys listening on podcasts or watching on YouTube, man, you're gonna love our guests. Exciting opportunity, Jesse. Thanks for getting that. But looking forward to this game today. Now, hopefully, I got my game
Right.
face on.
So let's get into this lawsuit update first. Obviously, there was a little bit of action that happened in North Carolina that's worth talking about. The motion to dismiss and the motion to stay both got denied in the North Carolina case. However, Florida State did pick up a win in North
Yeah.
Carolina. They ruled that Florida State does not owe the ACC a fiduciary duty. Basically, like, the ACC is in business with us. We're not necessarily in business with you.
Correct.
You owe us that duty. We don't owe it to you. And it got dismissed with prejudice, which means they cannot bring that back up.
Yeah.
Now, again, for the millionth time, we're not lawyers. I can't elaborate on what a lot of this stuff means. Florida State, their legal team did kind of throw some punches, throw some haymakers in the
It
Leon
is.
County case in a recent thing talking about the way this conference is run. But that's a couple of the latest updates in the North Carolina case. Not really a whole lot. It just means that the North Carolina case is going to proceed.
Yeah.
That's pretty much. I don't know if you have anything further on that.
Yeah, no, I just think that it's a bummer that they weren't able to get that case tossed out. We all know the ACC basically filed the lawsuit before FSU even had the chance to vote on if they
Right.
would file a lawsuit, and it was frivolous and all those things. But hey, when you're in your home court, you get home
Yeah.
court advantage, and so they end up winning that case. That doesn't mean, now again, we're not lawyers, but from what we've read and understood, doesn't mean the case is over. Doesn't mean Florida State is now on the losing end or is the underdog on all of this. It just means that now they're going to be basically fighting a battle on two fronts here in Tallahassee in Florida and in North Carolina, because the Florida case has to continue because of state laws and stuff.
Right.
But the North Carolina case will also continue as well too. But they did get that small win, like you mentioned, Jesse, that they do not owe a fiduciary duty to the ACC. So that actually does help them in the long run, even though that these two dismissals kind of hurt in the short term.
Yeah. And now, have seen some people say that maybe the North Carolina case is a good thing to proceed if North Carolina like jumps into this lawsuit
Correct.
and stuff like that.
Yep.
Maybe again, I'm not a lawyer. I can't really elaborate on how that helps or hurts. There's Rohan Law. Shout out to him.
Yep.
He's been doing a lot of really good updates on X or Twitter. Make sure you go follow him for all the legal advice. He
Right.
he boils it down for us, which we're grateful for. But yeah, I mean that's pretty much where it's at right now. Just kind of a couple little movements, but not much. Again, this is going to drag out for a long time, and
Right.
like you said, it doesn't mean Florida State lost. It doesn't mean that they still don't get to try their Florida case. And at the end of the day, man, like you're doing this. You were going into this knowing that you were exploring the option to get
Correct.
out to another conference. Like, if you, let's just say, worst case scenario, you lose. I mean, you were stuck in the ACC anyway. So like
Yeah.
now you just now they just know when that door unlocks, you're out of here.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure. And you're out of there, and God forbid they lose. Please don't lose. Please
right.
don't lose. But if they did, I mean, listen, we already have another ace in our sleeve, because while they're trying this case, we're also waiting on the whether or not ESPN is going to renew this deal. And all
Right.
indications, and when I say all indications, I mean based on what I've seen on Twitter,
Yeah.
uh it just seems like right now the ESPN would be unwise to renew that deal. That's so much money that they could otherwise be investing in the SEC, with them already bleeding cash. So, we there are a lot of things at least from our vantage point, looks like is working in Florida State's long-term favor. In the short term, doesn't look at as much, but in the long term, it definitely looks like potentially there are things setting out for Florida State to be out of this
Right.
conference.
And even if things were to go bad, but you still are able to get out in 2027, that's I think that's still a decent
It's
win
still
because
better.
you're
Yeah.
able to you'll be behind, but it won't be as bad as
No.
2036. That's a
No.
huge difference.
Yes.
And so yeah, we're just gonna kind of keep watching things as they go and see where Florida State ends up. But I think with what's happening, the development, the cases are gonna continue to go.
Yeah.
But I think you're working towards that settlement phase. I still think
That's
that's
right.
where it's gonna end up. I'm not sure that they're gonna get out of this scot-free or anything like that. You're probably still gonna have to drop some cash, but I think as long as you get them to the settlement table, then
Right.
then that's it. Now, with that being said, I do wanna touch on one thing real quick. The last episode we did on Florida State going to the Big Ten or the SEC, that was a pretty popular episode. It
It
did
was.
it did it did pretty good. And it sparked a lot of comments. I think we're at like 70, 80, 90, almost 100 comments on the YouTube video. So there's a lot of points in there. I understand what a lot of people are saying. And I just kind of want to clean up a couple things from that last episode. I think you know, I think the overarching theme in the comments kind of on a contrast to what we were saying. And keep in mind, we were saying that we like the Big Ten for the research money, for the AAU, if Florida State were to get that accreditation. We like it for all the academic aspects. We're in lockstep with you on that. But I think people also have to understand that this is a sports podcast. And so
Yeah.
we have to
That's right.
talk a little bit about the sports aspect. There's
That's
a
right.
lot of people who love the Florida State University, the academics, and all that stuff, and could probably care less about sports.
Right.
There's a lot of fans, some that may listen to this, that just really want to tune in and watch the Seminoles play somebody on Saturday. They want to go to
That's right.
work and talk smack to their friend that's probably lives in Florida and is probably an SEC fan.
That's right.
So
That's
there's
right.
people that are sports only aspects. So
That's
like
right.
while we do understand for the greater good, yes, the research money and all that stuff is wonderful, but we also have to approach it from a sports aspect. And again, that the SEC takes the cake when you're talking about a sports aspect. So there is that. I just wanted to touch on that. We understand, we're with you, and we understand both arguments. One is better for academics in the long term university outlook as a whole, and one is better from a sports perspective. But the other thing I wanted to touch on too is I get it, guys. We still don't like the SEC. I'm
Yeah.
with you on that. We still don't like ESPN. That narrative did not go away in the comments,
It
and it,
did
and it
not.
and it probably never will. I just think what's interesting with the SEC, and this is the only thing I wanted to touch up on, and then I'll kick it back to you for anything you wanted to clean up with that. Was look, I'm against the SEC too. I get it. They're the Death Star or whatever you want to talk about. They're the evil empire, whatever you want to call it. It was not the SEC that kicked Florida State out of the playoffs.
No.
It was the committee and ESPN and
Correct.
their dealings. Alabama was under no circumstance supposed to or expected to go, well, it's not fair what they did to FSU. Here, you have our spot.
Right.
That's not their fault. We wouldn't have
No.
done the same to them. So like I think
Correct.
you can't hate the C or the you can't hate the SEC for the snub. And I think if you look at it from an SEC perspective, if you get Florida State into that conference, you're still going to get that treatment.
Yeah.
If it comes down to Florida State versus say, I don't know, NC State has a good year or something like that, and they remain in the ACC, and you're vying for that last playoff spot. If you're in the SEC, Florida State's going to get the lean, so you
Yeah.
would get that preferential treatment as
Yep.
well if you did go to the SEC. So really, that's just a couple things I wanted to touch up on from the last episode. If you happen to watch it, if you haven't watched it, I encourage you to go back and watch it. We just have a fun discussion on where we think Florida State should go. We did a fan poll. Over
Yeah.
2,000 responses were recorded in that one. So just a couple things I wanted to touch up on after that last one.
Yeah, listen, that first of all, that episode was so much fun to record and do, and man, we're so appreciative of all of you guys in the
Right.
comments, and man, I love this. This is what I love about our fan base. We're so passionate,
Yeah.
and you pick a side, and if it's
Yeah.
not their side, they will get on you.
Oh, they're
Um,
going to come for you.
they're coming for you, man, and they chose violence every time.
Yeah.
But here's what I'll say to this. Okay, first of all, the Big Ten. Listen, again, we have nothing against the Big Ten. We have
Right.
nothing against Ohio State or Michigan or Penn State or USC or Washington or Oregon or even UCLA. We have nothing against that. But when you're talking about travel, when you're talking about, most of the fan base doesn't live within, a 2 hour time block of Tallahassee and all the places that they would be able to, or they would have to travel in the Big Ten. I mean, you have to think about that. Athletics pays the bills.
Yeah.
Let's just remind everybody of this. Athletic pays the bills of every part of the university's athletic program. Football does. Athletic pays it, football pays the athletics, right?
Yeah.
And so when you have the opportunity of the Big Ten as an overall opportunity, yes, it's great for research, it's great for academics, it's great. It's even a good football conference. I mean,
Right. Oh, yeah, yeah,
we
for
can't
sure.
deny it's a good football conference. It's a good basketball conference. Um, but when you talk about regionality, when you talk about natural baked in rivalries, when you talk about the ability, I mean, Jesse, you gave this incredible picture of what the travel would look like if we versus Big Ten versus the SEC. Like, it's a no brainer. Like, we would want to, most Florida State fans, if they remove the bias, and I'll get to that in just a second, they remove the bias about ESPN and the SEC being attached. You can't tell me you don't want to go to a game day at the Grove. You can't tell me you don't want to go
Right.
to Knoxville with 100,000 plus people.
Yep.
You can't tell me you don't want to go to Bryant Denny Stadium. You don't want to go to Walmart football stadium. I don't know what. Oh, it's Arkansas, wherever they play at.
Yeah.
You can't tell me you don't want to go to DK Memorial in Texas. You can't tell me you want to go to Oklahoma. You can't tell me that you don't want to
Right.
go watch those crazy lunatics at Texas A&M. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, almost every fan base, every stadium in the SEC outside of Vandy has an incredible atmosphere. It's drivable. It's easy to reach. And yes, while the top 5 fan bases, or I'm going to say 4, while the top 4 fan bases in the Big Ten might travel very well. I saw one of those comments. Oh, well, Penn State, Michigan, all they travel. Great.
Yeah.
Is USC traveling? Is Washington
Yeah.
traveling? Is Oregon traveling? That's across the country. You might get like a
Yeah.
couple hundred. You're not going to get a couple thousand like you would
Right.
in the SEC. And
And
then the other,
well, I was gonna say, and one thing that I will say, because before I forget, that you reminded me of a comment that someone said, well, we have fans all over the country, and it would
Mhm,
put them, and I get that, and I know that there are fans nationwide for Florida State.
mhm,
I understand that there's a lot of Big Ten retirees in the state of Florida. That's where they
mhm.
come to retire, so they could come to some home games. And I understand what that person was trying to say when they said that. But my thing is, we know it's predominantly in the Southeast. We know it's
That's right.
predominantly in the state of Florida. So I think it's while yes, you will open the door massively to about probably 25 to 30% of your fan base. You're also going to be shutting the door on the
Yep.
70% of your fan base that
That's
lives
right.
in the Southeast and already has to drive
That's right.
multiple hours to get to Tallahassee, because again, Tallahassee's kind of, out in the middle of nowhere, so it's
That's right.
hard to get to. And there was another comment that kind of laughed when we were talking about drive time. They're like, "Who drives nowadays? Everybody flies." And I'm like, "Have you seen all the stuff falling off planes
Exactly.
nowadays?" Like,
Yeah,
you
who's
know,
getting on a plane right now?
exactly. So it's like, yeah, man, there's arguments to both sides, and I think that also I want to give credit to some of the other Big Ten fan bases like
That's right.
Nebraska and all that stuff, that they do pack out their
Oh, they
stadiums.
do. They do.
But again, I think, like we said, when you get to that middle to lower tier brand of football in the Big Ten, it's just not the same.
It's
It's
just not the
just
same.
not.
And here's the thing, I'll tell you this, Jesse, and we've talked about this before. We even talked about it in the last episode. I lived in California for almost 6 years. And if I was still in California, would I have loved for Florida State to be able to come to USC, come to UCLA, go out to Oregon and Washington? For sure. I'll be
Right.
selfish, right? But if you told me they had an option to go to the Big Ten or the SEC, even with me living in California, I would have chose the SEC because I like the rivalries. I like the
Yeah.
pageantry. I like all of that I just don't think the Big Ten outside of their top tier brands has. Nebraska is a top tier brand of the Big Ten. Maybe not product on the field, but man,
Right.
I've been in Nebraska. I've been to that stadium, to Memorial Stadium. I've seen a game there. They sell it out. They have like one of the longest sellout streaks in the country right now, over years.
Yeah.
That's awesome. But when you get to Rutgers, when you get to Illinois, when you get to Michigan State, when they're terrible, like, I mean, you're just like, what? No, this doesn't compare to an Ole Miss or Mississippi State or a Texas
Right.
A&M or a
Auburn or something like
Auburn. I
that,
mean, it just doesn't
Yeah.
it just doesn't compare. And then the other thing I'll say this is like you said, Jesse, listen, your boys here, listen, we can't stand ESPN. We can't stand that four network. We can't stand it. We can't, makes us go crazy. But we recognize, as we're hoping you guys would if we end up in the SEC, is that, like Jesse said, the SEC did not screw us. Greg Slanky, Darth Vader himself, he was on ESPN campaigning for his teams to get in. That's what he's supposed to do.
Right.
Where you should direct your anger is Jim Phillips, who was over in the back getting screwed by the Big Ten and the SEC over and over again. That's who you should direct your anger to,
Yeah.
and ESPN too. Those two
And
for
old Boo.
sure. And
Let's
old
throw
Boo.
let's throw Boo in there. We can't
Yeah,
can't let old Boo off the hook.
no, no, and old Boo. That's who
Right.
your anger should go to, not the SEC. I know. It's the SEC. You
Who
know what? They're not the ones to blame.
By the way, Boo, if
By the
you're
way,
watching this, and
Boo.
I know you're not, but maybe you decided to tune in on this fine Friday morning. How's your Cinderella team doing that didn't deserve a chance that kind of
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, what a point.
Did you see him like crying when they made like the
Yes.
Elite Eight or Final Four? Like,
Yes.
man, you need like that's just the
But
irony
Boo,
of that.
Boo, I
Like,
thought you said that just weren't good enough. They didn't have the right kind of players. Like, how did they?
exactly. So how
Ugh.
ironic is that? And the last thing I will say to this, because we'll move on to another topic, but the last thing I will say is, as much as people hate the SEC and they say they don't want to go to it
Mhm,
because of what all happened, when we took that poll, it was around 2,050 votes.
mhm,
67% voted for the Big Ten. A lot of the comments were because they didn't want to be in the SEC because of what happened.
mm.
Man, here's the truth: if you took that poll a week before the snub, I guarantee you it would have been 67% the SEC.
Ooh,
I just do. Like, I just
yep,
do.
yep,
Because people loved the idea of going to play all these big teams. Look at we got Alabama on the schedule coming up. We got
yep.
Georgia on the schedule coming up, and
That's
everybody's
right.
excited about these big matchups.
That's right.
Everybody was cool with that until the CFP snub happened, and I just want to say that it wasn't the SEC that left you
That's
out.
right.
So,
That's
so
right.
like, I wouldn't hold that against them. You you kind of want that golden child
That's
treatment,
right. That's
if
right.
nothing else. So, but that's pretty much just some things we wanted to touch up on the last episode. So, with that being said, we'll kind of jump into the next topic. But before we do, Michael, it doesn't matter what conference you're in, you're going to get a great deal at Alumni Hall when you use code SPEAR to get
That's right.
10% off all the gear you want. Springtime coming up. You probably want some new FSU t-shirts. And Alumni Hall has great deal that you can stock up and save with 2 for 38 tees. They have them for baseball, basketball, football, all kinds of stuff. So go check them out and take additional 10% off with code SPEAR. So thank you for supporting those that support us. That's Alumni Hall FSU, 1415 Timberlake Road in Tallahassee, and then online at alumnihall.com. Navigate over to the FSU page. So, Michael, let's get into this game that I was talking about.
All right.
Keeping it football related here. So this is going to be a game that, let's be honest, I came up with this on my way home from work at 8 o'clock this morning. I hadn't been asleep in quite a while because I work night shift, for those of you that don't know. So I just came up with this on the way home. So when you talk about Florida State in 2024, you're looking at, we believe, if things go right, if things hit the way you think they should, Florida State could very well go 12-0.
Yep.
I think we both predicted most likely 11-1, which
Mhm.
I want to say something about that in a second. Um, did you see Riley Leonard is out right now, getting injured? Like, he got injured. He has to get some kind of surgery at
From
Notre
Duke?
Dame.
At Notre Dame? Oh my
Notre Dame.
gosh.
Now,
Wow.
I didn't see that he is not like, I don't think he's out for the season, but
Okay.
I'm not sure when he's going to be back. Now,
Oh
the
man.
good news is we have an announcement coming up next week as well.
Yes,
We've
we
hinted
do.
at it. If you guys follow us on social media, you probably already know what we're talking about. A little bit of partnership that's going to give us access to a lot of different things. And so there are some resources we can reach out to in that. So we'll find some more details out on that as things progress. There is a Notre Dame representative in there too, so we can get some inside information there as well. So we will leverage that partnership for you guys going forward. I just saw that and I was like, that could
That's
change things
interesting.
if
Yeah, it
that's a
could.
season-ending injury.
It
So
could.
anyway, back to what we were saying. Florida State, we feel like could go 12-0 to 11-1. That's probably their most likely record. If things don't pan out, because a lot of this, like we've talked about before, we love the talent on this team. We love the potential of this team. But there's a lot of unproven. There's a lot of question marks as to whether guys will produce to the level that we think they will. So realistically, I think Florida State's floor could be 9-3, maybe
Mm,
even 8-4 if you just get upset. You know what I mean? Because
right. Right.
it does
It
happen. I mean,
happens. Yep.
right, like, you have to figure Miami, I hate to say it, but, like, they have all the talent, they just don't never know how to use it. So, like, they have the talent, and you have to go to their place, and
Yep.
then of course, you have Notre Dame on the road. You have
Okay.
Clemson, who's
At home.
again, I
Yep.
know you get them at home, but technically that roster is still very talented.
You have
That's
that tricky game at SMU.
right. Like that's three toss ups right there. So if you
Right.
factor in maybe even one upset, now I think
Right.
Florida's a tough out, but man, you might be seeing DJ Lagway with an interim coach by the time you get to that game if they
That's
lost
right.
a lot. So we see where they could go 9-3, 8-4 if things go poorly. And so what we're going to do is like this is the spring edition. We'll revisit this later on, but this is wants versus needs. What do we feel like? What is the dividing line between 12-0 and 9-3? What do we
Okay.
want to happen that we feel like would push us over?
Okay.
And what do we feel like needs to happen for us to get to that level?
Gotcha.
And so the first one I want to throw out here is because obviously you start with the quarterback, the most, important position on the field in the game. And that is for DJU to throw for 3,000 yards or at least have 3,500 all purpose yards and at least 30 touchdowns all purpose. Now, the reason I say this, and we'll go for want or need, I was on the fence on this one because you have to understand when we talk about this, there's a lot of moving parts. Like if Florida State runs for 250 yards a game, no, he doesn't need to throw for 3,000 yards. It
Right.
is what it is.
Right.
But realistically speaking, I put this originally as a want, and then I like literally have out next to it want ish
Ish.
because I feel like this might be a need. And so I'll throw it to you, but let me make a little case on this first. So here's why I think this is an interesting topic to begin with. So keep in mind, DJU has not thrown for over 3,000 yards in his career yet. And so all purpose, last year he had 2,857 yards, did not play in a bowl game. That's just a regular season. In 2022 at Clemson, he had 3,066 yards, 29 total touchdowns. Now, they made the ACC championship that year. So that obviously shows you if you can hit that mark, that's going to
Right.
put you. Now, their defense had a lot to do with that, but you're hoping Florida State's defense will be good again next year. Now, you look at Jordan Travis. In 2023, he had 2,932 all purpose yards, 2,756 through the air. Of course, you have to remember he only played in like 10 games. Not I don't count the North Alabama. That was only
Right.
like a quarter and a half.
Right.
So again, like I've explained to you guys before, where I projected things using season averages because you felt like he would have been able to throw pretty good against, Florida's defense wasn't that good and neither was North Alabama. So if he'd have got to finish both of those games, he using his season averages, he would have had about 3,474
Mm.
roughly yards throughout the season, and that is in the regular season. That's not the ACC championship. So again, he would have eclipsed the 3,000 yard passing mark at around 3,282, and then he would have really pushed up against that 3,500 all purpose yards. And you see where that got Florida State. So then in 2022, Jordan Travis threw for 3,214 yards, 3,631 all purpose, and 31 touchdowns. Again, that turned Florida State into and
Yeah.
for all intents and purposes, their offense was better in 22 than it was in 23.
Yep.
And so that got Florida State to 10-3. Whereas, maybe there's a couple of things like they can get friggin' 3 points in the NC State game, and
My
then maybe if
God.
you didn't lose Fabian Lovett, which we're going to talk about that topic a little bit later, maybe you beat Wake Forest and you go 11-1. So just keep that in mind. And it's funny because last year or before 2022, there was a college football account that tweeted something out and it said, if you had to pick one player to ball out on your team this season, who is it and what is their stat line? And I would love to see, this was in May before the season started. I said, I would love to see Jordan Travis have at least 3,500 all purpose yards and 35 total touchdowns, which meant he probably didn't miss any time or any with injury.
Mm.
That year, remember, 3,500 and 35. He had 3,631 yards and 31 touchdowns. So we were pretty spot on there. And even to go back one further, in 2019, Memphis went 12-1 under Mike Norvell. They went 12-2
That's
overall,
right.
but he wasn't there for the Cotton Bowl. Brady White had 3,307 passing yards in the regular season. That's not
Mm.
counting the conference championship or the bowl game, and 32 touchdowns. So that's a really long way of saying when you look back at Mike Norvell's history, his best teams threw for over 3,000 yards in the regular season
Yeah.
and around that 30 touchdown mark. So again, can DJ do that as a guy who has not thrown for over 3,000 yards in his career? And the last thing I'll say before I kick it to you is throughout Mike Norvell's career, if he's had one consistent starter through the entire season, from the time he was at Arizona State to Memphis to Florida State, there was only one time that they did not hit 3,000 yards as a quarterback, and that was 2020 when they only played 9 games. The only other two times it happened, they used split quarterbacks because of injuries. So again, man, I initially said want, but I'm thinking that 3,000 yards and 30 touchdowns might be a need.
Yeah, I could see it definitely being a need. And here's why. Because if you can get DJ to get at least 3,000 all purpose yards, you mentioned earlier, like if they're running for 250 yards a game, you don't need him throwing for or getting that number. Well, you do, because here's why. Of those 250 yards, there's likely about 60 to 100 of those yards are going to come from the quarterback, right?
Yeah.
So if they're running him and they're using that run game, Mike Norvell likes to use that run game, that quarterback run game to keep the defense honest, keep those linebackers kind of sucked up. So when they want to go over top, because they're going to go over top. So, and he's going to leverage that as well. So he's going to use that quarterback run game to try to soften up that those linebacker play, and then of course jab with the running backs, jab with the quarterback, boom, over the top. Now you got
Yep.
these speeders on the outside. So you are going to need DJ to go for at least 3,000 plus yards all purpose, whether that's throwing and passing. You're going to need him to hit that 30 touchdown all purpose running and passing as well, because then I think you see the full gambit of a Mike Norvell offense. The whole purpose of going out and getting DJ is that now you get to expand the offense to,
Yeah.
whereas now you're taking more deep shots. Last year we kind of talked about this in the pre-show. You were taking deep shots with a quarterback that, while he had drastically improved his throwing motion, still probably wasn't your best deep
Right.
thrower. And now you have literally one of the best deep throwers
Yeah.
in the country. And so you're going to want to take advantage of that over top, which means you're going to have to leverage the underneath running game from both the running backs and the quarterbacks. So to me, that's not a want, that's a need. You're going to need him to go 3,000 plus all purpose yards so that you see the full gambit of a Mike Norvell offense.
Right. I agree. And when you look at last year, he did put up 27 total touchdowns. And in 2022 at Clemson, he put up 29. So he's been close. I just think he needs to take that next step to be able to hit that. And
Yeah.
it's funny because like we talked about, man, I think if you had I'd have felt really good if you'd have almost flip flopped the receiving core from last
Yeah.
year to this year,
Yep.
because like if you'd have paired the deep ball go getters with DJU, I think that would have been a recipe for success. Whereas I think Jordan would have done better with this year's receiving core, where you have more kind of spread them out, hit the underneath, work all the entire field and stuff like that. I think maybe that was would have been a better combination, but it's water under the bridge. But yeah,
Right.
I think and 3,000 yards through the air is not a high bar to set.
No.
I mean, when you look at what Brady White did that last year at Memphis in
Yep.
2019, I mean, now this is counting a conference championship and a bowl game. He threw for over 4,000
That's
yards.
right.
So, when you look at Jordan Travis with the bowl game and all that, it was 3,600 yards. I mean, they racked it up. So, yes, I do think you need to see him throw for 3,000 yards through the air. And like I said, he has not done that yet in his career. But I think that Mike Norvell, I mean, pretty much if you're a there's like death taxes and Mike Norvell quarterbacks throwing for over 3,000 yards. So that's why I think they can unlock that ability. And that's one reason why
I agree.
I think he will hit that number. And I think the important thing to remember too is this is not talking about, okay, we're trying to go 9-3, 10-2, something like that. This is
Right.
this is what needs to happen if you're trying to go 12-0,
12 and 0.
11-1.
That's right.
And so, yeah, I think you need to see that 3,000 through the air, and I would like to see the 30 close to 3,500 all purpose, because he's also brings that run threat.
That's right.
So now, staying on the offense, let's talk about who he's going to throw to. Now, this is another one where I think this is going to be a need. I think you need either. I don't think you have to have both, although both would be a luxury.
Okay.
I think you need either Hakeem Williams or Kentron Portier to
Mm.
take that step into being that wide receiver 2 level starter, not just like, where we've seen in the past where Portier put up like 280 yards or something
Yeah.
like that, where it was like, yeah, I mean, he made an impact, but he wasn't like a Keon and Johnny type of
Yep.
situation. We feel good about Malik Benson. Everybody feels like he's going to be an electric player. It's still not guaranteed. We don't
Nope.
know that. I mean, he
Nope.
didn't produce a ton at Alabama. We've talked about at nauseam about the reasons why. Quarterback play wasn't that great. Kind of in a stacked receiver room with two really good guys
Right.
there with Burton and Bond. But I think you feel good about him, but you need that number two. And the funny thing about this one is, I mean, we got like 35 receivers on this roster,
Right.
but right, but getting to some of the news from spring, Destin Hill is now out
Right.
indefinitely with an injury, and we don't know. Florida State doesn't release news injury, so we don't know how long that's going to last. So
Right.
that could hurt your depth.
Right.
Jarrell Powers at tight end is another guy that's out for the rest of spring.
That's
So
right.
you're kind of thinning that out a little bit. Now we're hoping Destin Hill can be back by the season because from what we understand, he was having a really,
Really good
really
spring.
good
Yep.
spring. And so
Yep.
you hope he comes back. But again, you talk about Darian Williamson. That's a guy that has flashed basically every time he gets on the field. It's just about once a season in 4
Yep.
years because he can't
Yeah.
stay healthy.
That's right.
You talked about this too with Deuce Spann. He's got all the talent in the world. You still don't know that you can feed him more than 3 or 4 times a game because
Right.
he's still learning that
Still
position.
learning. Yep.
Right. And so I think when you start to look at guys you want to rely on. Of course, you have Jalen Brown. He has
Right.
12 snaps in college. He's not proven. Now, he looks good and it looks like he's going to contribute sooner than later, maybe sooner than we expected. I think he went from like a 25, 26 piece to now he's going to work in 24. But
Yep.
man, I think it would be so big for this offense to get one or both would be great. But if you could get one of those two, and I will say, while I do think this is a need, I think both of them bring different individual skill sets. Now, we've seen Portier have another big spring.
That's right.
Same thing that happened last year. He was basically the king of the spring,
That's right.
making some ridiculous catches that have been released in highlights by Florida State. I think Hakeem Williams also is that high ceiling guy, that 5-star. He's good at blocking. So, yeah, man, I think for Florida State to be that team that you want them to be, I don't think you can just kind of be like a one-trick pony with Malik Benson on the outside. Now you got a couple of slot guys if Destin Hill comes back, but we were talking about earlier. You're a little thin there too with just Jakai, who's
Right.
as far as proven. There's young
Right.
guys that we don't know, and
Right.
of course they can step up at any moment.
Oh yeah.
Freshmen, sophomores have breakout seasons.
That's right.
Man, I think you need one of those two to take that next step. Maybe not a Keon Coleman type of season, but I'm thinking you need at least your second wide receiver to be somewhere in that 500-yard range.
Yeah, listen, I'm thinking about a game last season where our top two wide receivers were out. Some other players were injured, and it was Jordan Travis's best game,
Yeah.
right? But it was basically the Jordan Travis, Ja'Kai Douglas game was
Yeah.
basically what
Yeah.
happened, right?
Yeah.
And while Mike Norvell and that whole offense, they figured it out. They figured out how to win that game. You cannot have that happen again. You cannot go into a game where when your two best wide receiver options are out, you're basically now hand strapped. You got one hand tied behind your back. And so I think this is a need. To go 12-0, you need, and I'm going to put it this way for you, Jesse. You need both Hakeem Williams and Portier to be good. You
Yeah.
also need one of them to be great.
Yeah.
Okay. They both need to be good, but you need one of them to step out and be the clear number two, potentially alongside, a Malik Benson or something like that. Right.
Yeah.
You need one of them to be great. You need both of them to be good. Listen, this is this Portier's last year here?
I'd have to look it up. I
Potentially.
think
Okay.
I think yeah,
Well,
it's either
it's
this one or
time.
next one. Yeah,
It's
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 time.
time.
It's time. Yeah, yeah,
Regardless of what it is, it's time. It's time for this dude to step up. Now, Jesse, he's one of my breakout players
yeah,
for the year that I've picked, him and Hakeem. So this is a perfect game for that. It's time for Portier to put a whole season together. I know injury, you can't control injury,
right,
but if
right.
he can put a whole season together, stay away from the injury bug, he can be a good receiver. Now, I argue that Hakeem is the one you want to become great. Not that Portier can't be great, but Hakeem is the one you want to see take that really big step because he's the best of the two in blocking. He has the better, bigger, more NFL ready body of the two. He is the 5-star receiver, and you're trying to show other receivers that, hey, you can come in this offense and within a year or so, you can be a playmaker. You can be dynamic. Look at the way your body changes. I mean, I still think back to the day of if Hakeem could have played a lot more, what that would have said
Mhm.
for Jeremiah Smith at Ohio
Yep.
State.
Yep.
I just
I
think
was
about that.
I was just about to say, I mean, as long as you have Brian Hartline at Ohio State, you gotta put something on film because, I mean, they are
Correct.
just recruiting the heck out of receivers.
They're just getting the best of them. And so this is why I think I would argue that you need both of them. You need so between want and need, this is a need. You're going to go 12 and 0. You need both of them to be great or good, but you need Hakeem to be great. You need Hakeem to get 500 plus yards, at least 5 to 8 touchdowns, some breakaway stuff, probably in that 50 range of catches per season. Uh, the drops need to come down. I know that's been I know we'll talk about spring at some time, but that's been a bugaboo of the spring right now is the wide receivers are dropping stuff.
Yep.
So like the consistency of that, you need Portier to be good. You need Hakeem to be great.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would like to see one at least be that high level starter.
Yeah.
Because I think when you look back, if you could even have, and that doesn't mean that Malik Benson is going to be wide receiver number one. It doesn't
Right.
mean
Right.
it's just right now we feel like he's the most ready
Right.
to be wide receiver number one. But even if you can get like an Ontario Wilson, a Pokey Wilson type of
That's right.
season out of him as your speedy guy, it would be nice to have that big body box him out type of receiver on the other side, like you had with Johnny Wilson.
Yep.
Because again, that also shades coverage. How many times did you see where they were doubling up Johnny Wilson, which
That's
allowed
right. Keon.
Pokey
Okay. Yep.
or Keon to have a good game because
That's
you
right.
you distracted them. So you don't want that just one dominant guy. You need one of those to step up.
That's right.
So now let's switch over to defense real quick because we're getting a lot of needs here. Feels like we're being a little needy. So the first one I have here, this is a two-parter, and I'm
Okay.
still going to be a little needy on this one, but would you take a defensive tackle in the portal? I have this down as a want. I
Yeah.
don't think you have to have one. I think you want one. That's me personally. Now, what I say about the two part of that, the follow up to that is I think you would answer that with a need, and that
Yeah.
is you need these defensive tackles to stay healthy.
Yes, you do.
Or else, and you can't plan for injury. I mean, you can prepare for it, but you can't plan for it. That leads me to almost put the defensive tackle into a need. But I'm just going to say a want because I don't know the whole roster. I'm not
Yeah.
Odell Higgins. I can't
Yeah.
speak on what the depth players that we haven't seen are. But the point that I made with this was when you think back to, like, let's first look at 24. Your D tackles, you're starting two, potentially about 3 to 4. You feel pretty good about. You
Yep.
you know
Yep.
Daryl Jackson and Josh Farmer are going to be dogs. Like, you
That's
know
right.
that. You feel pretty good about what you're going to get out of Grady Kelly, and you feel like Daniel Lyons is a guy, but KJ Sampson is still young. I mean, you have to remember, not only did you lose your top end guys like Fisk and Fabo and all that, you also lost a couple of other guys, like a Malcolm Ray, some of the depth
That's right.
guys that bolted for the door. So you still need, and Dennis Briggs and guys like that. So you still need a little depth there. Now, I think what's kind of funny is it's almost like we flip flop from D in to D tackle from last year to this year. Whereas
Yeah.
like last year, you felt really good about your ones at defensive end, but then it got pretty slim as for the talent drop off. You had some guys, but the talent drop off from the ones to the twos
Right.
was pretty steep. Whereas this year, I think D tackles that where you have a boatload of defensive ends.
Yep.
You feel great about it, but you're a little thin at defensive tackle now
Yes,
when you
you
look at
are.
just depth down the depth chart. And the reason that's important is like, sure, if you stay healthy, which is what I said was the need,
Right.
maybe you don't need one. But at the same time, I think you have to look back at 2022 or
That's right.
excuse me, 2021 when you lost, or no, it's 22 when you lost Fabian Lovett. That had a lot to do with your inability to stop the run up the middle. If you're trying to go 12 and 0 and Daryl Jackson and Josh Farmer miss any amount of time, especially a big game, I'm going to be nervous
That's
because I
right.
I just I think that not only that, if you bump one of your twos into a one spot, now your depth is even further down the
Oh, yeah.
line. So I don't think you necessarily need to go out and get, another. I mean, it'd be nice to get another Braden Fisk, and
Yeah.
competition breeds excellence. So I don't
Right.
I don't think you need to go out and get a guy who started at Georgia last year or something like that. But I think you need like a experienced, solid guy just to give you depth in case you get that injury up front. Now, like you were telling me before the show, they have moved Durajaye inside a little bit. They're kind of
Yes,
working
they
him at
have.
defensive
Yep.
tackle. He's kind of like that Dennis Briggs body where like he's
Yeah.
big enough to play defensive tackle. He's just a small defensive tackle,
Right.
but he can also play defensive end. So maybe that's a multi-purpose guy that they're cross training to provide that depth. But man, I'm going to say the portal is a want, but if it's only a want, you need the health to be a need.
Yeah.
And health is always a need. Let's make that clear. You always want all your guys.
That's right.
But there's a few position groups here where if you sustained one guy, you're fine.
You're fine.
But
Yep.
defensive tackle does not feel like one of those positions.
No, I mean, yeah, outside of Daryl Jackson and Josh Farmer, you basically have KJ Sampson, Grady Kelly, um, Daniel Lyons, and then there was one more I was looking at. Oh, I can't remember who
And
was
I
the
do
other
like
one.
Daniel Lyons. I will say that.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yes.
But some of this is a product of you sent a few guys, on their way to the league
You
and stuff
did.
like that.
Mhm.
And let's be frank, man, high school recruiting at the defensive tackle position has struggled a little bit.
That's
So
right.
like you just don't have that next 4 and 5 star
No.
guy to step in off the bench. So you kind of have to go get it from the portal.
So you're only 5 deep at DT and you're playing 2 DTs. Now, depending on how they, if they go 4-3-3-3-4, they do that hybrid kind of line situation there.
Right.
They can miss and match and they can figure it out. I'm going to say that is there a middle option to this want or need? Because I feel like that's where we are. I
Yeah,
feel like we're in the middle.
we can call it like the well, I don't want to call it weed because then we
Yeah.
might get we might get this might not be flagged as a family friendly show if we call it a weed. But you know what I mean? Like,
There's definitely some middle gray area to this. It's both a want, but it's also a need because you're absolutely right. If either one of Daryl Jackson or Josh Farmer gets hurt and you have to move a Grady Kelly up or Daniel Lyons up, well, now you're at 2. That's
right.
it. Your rotational body's at 2 deep. That's all you got. And so now you have this issue of where, man, obviously you're going to lose the production, the skill level goes down, the excellence goes down, all those things because that's why they're not starting. Even though they rotate all the defensive tackles and they have a rotation with that, that's going to hurt. So you're 5 deep, so you don't necessarily need another DT. But man, if one goes down, wouldn't it be great to know that you have maybe another two, like a 2 on the depth chart, number
Yeah.
2 level player ready to go that can at least hold you and sustain you until hopefully that injury comes back, or God forbid it's a catastrophic injury and it's out
Yeah.
for the whole season. Wouldn't it be nice to know that you at least have a plug and play defensive tackle ready to go? That's just been a rotational piece that's not going to hurt your depth. Like I feel like in today's era of college football, it's always been, but even more so now, your lines are the most important
Yeah.
things on your team. So your offensive line and your defensive line. And to make sure that you have a backup plan for your backup plan for your backup plan, right?
Yeah.
You do not want to go into the season, have one of your stars get injured, then moving one of your 2s up, and now your 3s and 4s are like, oh, what are we gonna do here? You might want to
Right.
have the double of the 2 sitting there ready to go. I just think you don't want to. That This is where I'm like, man, it feels like
Yeah.
a need, but it also
Yeah.
feels like a want.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing too is again, keep in mind that we're talking about from the eyes of trying to go 12-0. And when you look at the teams that have been dominant in the past, the recent national championship winners and stuff like that, they win with depth in the trenches.
That's right. That's right.
Clemson is like they might be here or there with their skill players sometimes. They are loaded on the defensive line. Georgia, Alabama, even Michigan. These are teams that are loaded on the defensive line. They can come at you in waves. So I think that I will say I understand that it is a little hard to hold that depth
I
nowadays
get it.
because
Yeah.
with the portal, you might not have guys that want to stick around to be like that. But I just feel like you don't want to try and make a national title run where if you lose like one defensive tackle, it could derail your whole plans.
Yep.
And that also goes for nursing a nagging injury. Like Josh Farmer is out for the spring. They said it looks very positive that he'll be back for the season, and it's not anything major. but that can linger. What if you
Yep.
re-aggravate that, and
That's
maybe you
right.
just want to give them a game or two off because it's whatever week, and you don't feel like you need them or something like that. So, yeah, man, I think this one's a bit of a weed. It's kind of
Yeah.
it's kind of in the middle. It really is. So with that one, we'll move on. Another offensive topic that I want to go on is, does the run game need to be more productive than they were in 2023? And I'm going to put this as a need. I think it is. So looking back at the numbers, in 2022, Florida State they ran all over
Man,
everybody.
they were
They
just
averaged 214
whew.
yards a game. I don't expect them to do that again. I don't. It'd be great if they could. I think they can. I just don't. That's an insanely high number. 33 touchdowns on the ground. In 2023, that number dropped. Now, the touchdowns only fell down one to 32,
Gotcha.
but the yards per game dropped down to 150. That's 64 yards a game dropped off from 2022. Now, this is a kind of a this is an onion question. You got to peel it layer by layer.
That's right.
Was there a little bit of stuff with the backs with, and I know you'll touch on this as well with Trey Benson, that was a bit of a boom or bust back? Was it on a little bit of the offensive lineman? Yeah, I think so too. Did you have a mobile quarterback who was one of the most legitimate run threats in college football that never ran the ball until late in the season because of injury? And when he did, he got injured. So, like, I think this is a multifaceted question, but I do think it does need to get a little bit better, because
Yes.
for you to be the team that you want to be, you running the ball successfully takes that pressure off DJ.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
as good as we feel about DJ at quarterback, there's still no guarantee that he's just going to find it. You know what I mean? Like, yes, we think Norvell and them in this offense can use him to his best ability and all that. You may get another typical season around 3,000 all purpose yards or something like that, where that's kind of his ceiling. We just don't know. And so I think if you have that running game that can take the pressure off of DJ, so he maybe doesn't have to win games until he proves that he can, I think that's going to be very beneficial. And we know Mike Norvell really likes to run the ball in this
Yes.
offense as well. And I'll kick it back to you on a couple of things. So in 2023, uh, this is going to be kind of a two-parter. The minimum rushing that a CFP team had that was not named Washington was 169 yards a game. So
Mm.
about 20 yards more per game than you ran for in 2023. Now, Washington's rush offense was pretty freaking terrible. They were 106 in the country
Oof,
at
they were terrible.
118 yards a game. So can you make it to the playoffs and make it to the national championship
Yes.
without running for 170, 100, 200 yards a game? Of course you can. They also had Michael Penix in the number 2 pass offense in the country. So unless you think DJU is about to have a Michael Penix type of season, you need the run game. And then in 2022, just because I looked up one extra year, the minimum run game per yards per game by a team in the playoffs was 192 yards a game.
Oof.
So again, like, I think if you can, obviously if you're an air raid team,
You're
you
not
can you
right.
can throw the ball 400 yards a game. You don't have to run it like that. But I think to be able to lean on that run game, to be able to have that successful run game and that defense that we're hoping Florida State can have, would do worlds for this offense.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, just look at that. I don't I don't anticipate that Mike Norvell wants to turn DJU into Peyton Manning or Tom Brady.
Right.
I don't know if he even has that capability. I would imagine that if you look at the history of Mike Norvell led offenses, the run game has factored in significantly. I mean, go
Yep.
back to his days at Arizona State, go back to Memphis. I mean, early Florida State. That was, I mean, you remember 2020, 2021? All we had was the run game.
Yeah, I
We
think
didn't
2020 we averaged 199 yards a
Yeah,
game.
we were running all over people because that's
Right.
all we could do.
Exactly.
We
Yeah.
could throw the ball.
We were a
And then
triple option team.
we were basically I just watched a replay the other day of Jordan Travis. They were, I think, Florida State was like 3-6 at the time, and
Yeah.
Jordan Travis busted out this read option on Pitt and just took it all the way home. Or maybe it was some like low level team. I can't remember what the team was, but it just made me think, man, we used to run all over people
Yeah.
and just not even apologize for it. And last year, I thought we got away from that. Now, I think there were several reasons for that. Okay.
Right.
I think there were several reasons why we did that. I think with Trey Benson, you had a boomer bust um type of running back who it seemed like in 23 he was like a straight down north or south, get the hole, get out. And you had Trayshawn Ward, you had all of that. That was, I mean, it was just incredible to see how they were able to do that. It seemed like this past season, he started to try to dance more in the hole, in the pocket there,
Yeah.
as they call it, tried to make guys miss in a phone booth, all those things. And that's just not his game consistently.
Right.
When you saw him go north and south, you saw him break out um, big runs. When you saw him try to dance in the pocket, you saw them get tackled behind the line of scrimmage a lot of times. Now, why was he dancing? Well, you could probably also pin that a little bit to the offensive line. I mean, the shuffling all season long. I mean, gosh, I don't think they had a consistent lineup all season
Yeah.
long last year. Not that I remember, and I could be wrong. So in the comments, let us know. But I don't think they had a consistent lineup all season long. They were
Mm-mm.
shuffling in and out of players. Some players were playing out of position. Some players just were not good at the guard spot when you're using the GT pool counter, which is Mike Norvell's bread and butter run play with
Mhm.
Alex Atkins there. And so them not playing as well forced the running backs to kind of have to dance in the pocket a little bit. But you saw Trey do it a lot more than normally he would have. So you have some of that. I would also say too, and you may not agree with me, Jesse, is that I thought some of the play calling at sometimes just seemed a little bit, and Mike Norvell is very aggressive, and it's one of the things I love about him. But there were just moments where it was like, this is a clear run down, like
Yeah.
run the ball here. And we're chucking it up 50 yards down the field for
Yeah.
incompletion. And so I think also that kind of played into the effect as well, too. And that's possibly because Mike Norvell knew what he had in the offensive line
Right.
and what was
Right.
going on with the running back. So I'm not, please don't, if you're watching this, Mike Norvell, please don't hear us saying that I think you did a terrible thing. I'm just saying that I think I think the play calling also factored into why the run game went down a little bit.
Right. And I will say that I think the run game has the potential to be much better this year.
Yeah.
And I think that's a sum of all parts. That's not on any one person. I think that with the added depth of the offensive line, I think the TJ Ferguson and the
Yeah.
Richie Leonard from Florida, I think are going to give you kind of those bigger, more athletic guards that should be able to hit those pull assignments. And then I also like you have a little more variety in the backfield. You
That's
now
right.
have Toa Philly, who's got more experience. You
Right.
have Keziah Holmes, who can be factored in, who we saw make a couple flashes late in the season. I think that Cam Davis, from what we've seen in spring, you are not going to be able to keep him off the field,
That
even as a
boy is a
freshman.
tank.
Man, he's going to be really good. Like he's going to
Oof.
be one of the next great ones. And then obviously Sam Singleton is a guy that
That's
kind of
right.
gets lost in translation. That flashes a lot. And then I think
Come on, Sam.
you also have Jalen Lucas in there.
Oh man.
And that's a gadget back that's going to be able to give you that really kind of quick shifty guy, can do things out of the backfield. And then of course Roydell Williams gives you a little bit of power too. So I just think all those things combined, as well as having DJU, who's that guy that did run it over 100 times at Clemson, that's kind of built for that can show you those things. Like I know people talk about him being like 240 or 255 or something like that, but man, I've watched a couple clips from him at Clemson, and there was one that I saw floating around social media the other day where I forget the team they were playing, but basically he's standing in the pocket and there's literally a dude like holding his leg, like got it in a bear hug, and DJ just stands there and flicks it in for a touchdown. And it's like, man, he's got the power. So like you want to see him use that size and that strength. So I think they can be better. And so but I think you're going to need that because
Yeah.
you know, if DJ comes out of nowhere and just has some breakout season and Mike Norvell just unlocks something, I think you're going to want to have that run game there. It's kind of that security blanket.
That's right.
But of course, I'd love to see DJ break out,
Yeah.
and all of this could be for nothing. It seems like every time I say they need to do something, I'm gonna be like, we need to throw for 3,000, and next thing you know, Mike Norvell's running the triple option. So who
That's
knows?
right.
We could be completely wrong, but that's what I think
Yeah.
are some of the needs. And of course, this, like I said, I came up with this like 2 hours before we record, so maybe we'll do a little more. We'll do an updated version of this closer to the season when we kind of know a little bit more about the
Yeah.
position groups in the
Yep.
roster. But in the meantime, if you're watching this on YouTube, drop in the comments what is your number one want for this offseason yet remaining, and then what is one thing you think needs to happen for
That's
Florida
right.
State next year? So drop that in the comments. Let us know what you think if you're watching on YouTube. And so with that, Michael, we will transition to kind of wrap things up here as we get close to an hour. let's talk a little bit. Just give me a few minutes, and we'll talk a little bit about baseball and
Let's
basketball, and
go.
then we'll wrap this up. So basketball, man. Let's get the bad news out of the way first. Uh, do we even have a basketball team anymore? I'm really not sure. So I'm not sure. It sounds like, from all intents and purposes, that they're going to give Leonard Hamilton kind of that victory lap year, that one last year to go out. And I understand that it's the last year on his contract. You really don't benefit at all from moving on early and having to pay a buyout and things like that. You got facility upgrades you're doing. You're trying to get all this stuff
Keep
going. You're in the
going.
middle of a lawsuit. I
Keep
think
going.
it's just smarter for the school to hang on to him for this
Yeah.
year. The problem is, as of right now, as of when we're recording this on April the 5th, Florida State has already lost 9 players so
Yeah.
far between either attrition or the portal. Now, you still have Jameer Watkins coming back, who was your best player this year. Do you think he's coming back? He hasn't decided yet. That could change. Jalen Warley is also a talented player. Chandler Jackson and Taylor Boboan, are coming back as well. So you have a little core to build around. You just landed 4-star point guard Daquan Davis and a couple of high school guys. So there's some pieces there. But man, if I really would love to see him go out on top because of the obviously, got robbed in that COVID season and
That's
things
right.
like that. But man, you're going to have to overhaul this roster big time. I mean, you lost a lot of really some of your most talented guys, Primo Spears and a lot of these guys that hit the portal. And I, Florida State's a football school, man. I don't know how much they're going to invest into this last year, but yeah, man, I just wanted to touch on basketball because it's like the bleeding has not stopped yet.
No. Yeah, I just think in this era of college basketball with the transfer portal and just everything that's kind of happening, for a coach to be in his last contract year, it is almost it's just a dire straits in any facet because recruits know he's not coming back next year. At least I'd
Right,
imagine they know that, right?
right.
The coaches know he's not coming back next year. The administration knows he's not coming back next year.
And he
Is
and
this
he could. I mean, he
he could.
could.
You're right. You're right. He could have a great season, and they're like, "Let's run it back." All right, let's
Right.
do it again. But right now, he has no contract extension. He has 1 year left. A
And
lot
it's
of the
time.
and it's time. Everybody recognizes that. I even believe he there's. I mean, I would imagine he probably recognizes that.
Right.
But also in this era of college basketball, what makes this not such a dire strait is that he could literally go into the portal and find, 5 or 6 serviceable G5 players who could help him come in this year. They got 1 year left, whatever it may be. Come play. You're going to play for a Hall of Famer. You're going to play at a program that, while yes, it's a football school, it's had some recent success.
Right.
And this is your farewell tour. This is like, I'm gonna go off on top. Now, wouldn't it be like Ham at a
Yeah.
supposedly farewell tour to then like go win like 25 games, win the ACC tournament championship, get to the Elite Eight, and we're like, oh, another year, and he's like,
Yeah.
peace.
Right. I
Like
know.
that could be that. You just that's the beauty. That's the thing that even though us pure at heart college basketball fans who miss the old days of players staying 4 or 5 years
Yeah.
in this era of college basketball, you could literally turn the team over instantly
Yep.
overnight. And so I think he will my assumption is he will go out and find some players. Maybe they were on the fringe. They didn't get a lot of playing time elsewhere, but they're good enough. They're defensive enough. They're long enough. They have some offensive ability. I think he'll bring it all in. You'll see a typical defense grinded team in his last season, and he's going to ride with that. And I think I think the administration was smart into saying, look, if we have our what is the we have our we have too many frying pans right now. Is that the
Yeah.
saying? Yeah, we have too many
Too many
frying
irons
pans.
in the fire.
Ain't too many irons in the fire. There it is. Too many irons in the fire for us to make this, because this is going to require a big shift. The payout,
Yeah.
the landing of new coaches, the payout of the assistants, the landing new assistants, a whole thing. And so they were smart to say, let's just finish out this contract. And then we'll see where we're at the end of the year.
Right. Because by the time you hit 2025, there's going to be a lot of things known. I mean, Doak will be done. The lawsuit
Correct.
could very well be done.
Hopefully.
And then I think the other thing too, with the portal not having really any kind of rules at the moment anyway, you could even sell to players. Now, this maybe not be what you want because, like you said, you want them to hang around. But you could even be like, hey man, if you come here and you like it, and we get a coach that you want, stay. But if not, just come put
You can
yourself on,
transfer again.
like, come play in the ACC for a year. Like you said, if
Yes,
you're a G5 guy, or maybe from a lesser conference or something like that, you can come play in the ACC for a year, get some exposure, go somewhere else next year. You can at least
exactly.
do that. But I hope that they can put together something for him to at least have a decent run, and not 17-16 like they were this year.
Right.
That would be something you'd like to see. At least make it to the tournament one last time. Kind of like how Mike Martin went out.
Yep.
When in his final season, maybe they just had that miracle run. Maybe they
Oh
make an
man,
NC State type of run or
that'd
something.
be
Who knows?
nice.
I mean, we smacked NC State in the regular season, and then here we are. Uh, but lastly, I want to touch on baseball real quick. So far, still hanging in there, still doing very well. 24-4 on the season. They got a series against Boston College coming up this weekend. Should be very winnable for them. I think
Yes.
this is a potential sweep candidate, but they should at least get the series win. And man, when you look at it, I think you just really have to be happy with their performance so far. I saw the other day that Link Jarrett won the perfect game midseason coach of the year.
Yes, he
You're
did.
having Florida State projected as like some top seeds looking into the postseason. There's a lot of baseball left to play. You still have Wake Forest, you still have Duke on the schedule, you still have Miami. You got another game against Florida. So there's still a lot of tough tests on the schedule. But I mean, again, you feel good about, like, the Louisville's having you already got that series win. Pitt's having a really down year. That could be another ACC
Right.
series win for you as well. But man, you just got to be happy so far. I mean, you look at, we are right about midway through the season right now. I think actually before this weekend series, you are right at the halfway point right now.
That's right.
And Florida State has got 24 wins. They had 23 all season last year.
That's right.
So, like, unless you go on a 30-game losing streak, which I would hope not, obviously that would be just, I don't know even know how that would even happen. You feel like this team, and I was kind of doing some counting and projecting. I mean, I feel like this team legitimately can fall somewhere around 36 to 40 wins.
Man,
And
that's
so
good.
that's a really good season that probably gets you to host a regional. And so, like, man, that's huge. And just looking at some of the numbers from last year to this year, and we're looking at maybe doing a midseason review, so I won't dive too far in, but just looking at some of the things that have changed. Florida State in last year had 55 home runs the entire season.
Mm,
They have 53 already. So, like, it looks like, the power's back in the lineup. The pitching has done so much better. They're currently holding a 3.64 ERA. Last year they finished with a 5.75 ERA. I mean, looking at strikeouts, they had 518 last year. They're already at 348 this year, and they're only halfway through the season. So you could, I mean, almost double that. And so, like, man, I really think that this team has found themselves. I think they got it going. Probably the most exciting thing is you've seen the bullpen step up to the challenge after that kind of late game Clemson meltdown, that just terrible weekend. They rose to the challenge. And so I
yeah.
think, once they rebounded, which was really nice. You got the Florida game coming up
Yep.
next week, not looking ahead from Boston College, but it's sold out.
That's
You
right.
had 6,000 people in Hauser for the Louisville game. So, like, man, you feel the momentum building, and
Yeah.
I know it's still early. You got, like we said, you got a lot of tough series coming up, but man, I feel like Florida State has an opportunity to clinch just about every series. I mean, Duke is one that you're worried about. Like I said, and Miami's still a good team, and you got Wake Forest out there, but you've already faced the best team on the schedule in Clemson.
Yep.
And yeah, you got run ruled in the first one. I get it. Whoops. Stuff happens. Baseball's a weird sport, but you also
That's
had
right.
them on the rope in 2 games, and you've
That's right.
bounced back since then. So, man, I just, looking at this team, kind of looking at like a halfway point evaluation, man, you just got to be happy with the growth and the
Yep.
projection that they have. And like, man, if they can keep this up, they're going to make a postseason run, and they might even get to Omaha. And that's really exciting to see how fast you can turn things around. Again, back to basketball. This baseball team turned around basically overnight with a lot of
Overnight.
portal stuff, right? And so the same thing can happen in any sport. But yeah, man,
Right.
I'm excited with the progress so far this season at the halfway point.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm the same way. I mean, what you saw in that Clemson game where they basically they had the series won. They
Yep.
basically won 2 of the 3 games, and they had the meltdown. And then to come back against Louisville and win that series, win 2 out of 3 there. And the only reason they lost the middle game was because your starter gave up 4 runs, 4 earned, whatever you want to call it there. They gave up 4 runs immediately, pretty quickly. And so if that doesn't happen, you sweep that series. You go into this week, you take care of business against Boston College. You get Florida at home. You get a chance to Sweep the
But
series?
by the way, did you know we're the red bandana game this weekend in baseball?
Of
Like,
course we are.
do y'all not play anybody else? I mean, for goodness, I saw
My
that and I was like,
goodness.
"Are we the only rival that you have? Like,
N
pick someone else."
Now
Anyways,
watch they pull out Constantino from somewhere and he starts running all
exactly,
over us.
exactly.
But anyways, my whole point is this: like, yes, man, Link has come in there and just done an incredible job. First year was a mitigated disaster, but everyone understood like it's going to take a bit to clean up the program
Right.
after what it had been for the last couple of seasons. So to turn this roster around, to turn this program around, to have the energy in the air, to have a sold out Hauser Stadium. I mean, just there's just so much excitement. Now, I'm a professional baseball guy. I haven't always been huge in college baseball, and I am now watching a lot more college baseball,
Yeah.
particularly Florida State baseball, because of how excited I am about this baseball team. So if you can get a fan like me who's always been like a kind of a
A
a,
fringe.
a fringe baseball fan for college baseball to
Yeah.
become a deeply passionate fan, you're doing something right.
Yeah, I just love the emotions of college baseball. They go at each other, they
Yeah.
chirp and back and forth and all that. So it's exciting. Speaking of chirping, softball is one of the most
Oh
man.
man.
Them
Are they
girls are.
nine straight, right?
Well, I was gonna say those girls are ruthless when you watch
Woo.
college softball. It's a fun sport to watch. But yeah, I think they're on an 8 or 9 game win
Yeah,
streak. Hasn't really been against too many ranked teams, so we still got to get over that hump. But I mean,
yeah,
again, you're just finding momentum at the
that's
right
right.
time, like we talked about with the NC State basketball team. It's all about timing. But yeah, I just wanted to touch on baseball and a little bit of the basketball news, just to kind of round out things for you guys here. But with that being said, again, they got the season or the series against Boston College coming up this weekend, so we'll be looking for them to do well up there, and then they return home against Florida for an exciting sold out game in Hauser. But yeah, we're going to wrap it up there, guys. Like I said, we have that episode to watch out for coming up next week. I know you guys are going to be excited about that, as well as an announcement of the new partnership coming up next week. So, big week for us here at Plant
Yes,
the Spear
sir.
next year. And we appreciate you guys because you guys are what fuel everything, those
That's
for you
right.
watching. So, thank you for watching. Thank you for, all your support, supporting the sponsors that support us. Make sure to like and subscribe if you've watched this far to stay tuned because I'm telling you, hit that notification bell because you don't want to miss that next episode. It's going to be really fun. I can't wait. We don't have a whole lot of guests on here, but we when we get one, we aim high. So
We aim
far,
high.
we've had Marvin Jones, and now we have a 2013 the Marvin Jones has been on here, which is still on our channel if you want to go check that out. And then we have also now we're getting a 2013 national champion. So they're few and far between, but when we get them, they're pretty good. So just really looking forward to that this week. So you guys make sure to stay tuned for that. And I guess we'll end it right there, Michael, and we'll catch you guys on the next one. So you guys have a great weekend. Thanks for tuning in. And as always, go
Go
Noles.
Noles.